Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I have a full review for you of the Object 292, which is the level 100 reward for the brand new Flames of War season. This is an Eastern Alliance Era 3 heavy tank, and from my experience today in my play session, it's only really a heavy tank by name. By nature it's more like a heavy medium tank. Wargaming say that it's got great penetration and decent mobility, but what doesn't have decent mobility in Era 3? So we're going to head on over to the Excel spreadsheet where I've got the stats of the Object 292 here on the left, and we're going to be comparing in today's video to three other vehicles. Two tank destroyers in the form of the Object 477A Malo, which was released when I was taking my extended break and is a very overpowered tank destroyer, and also the CATTB Thumper, which has been out for quite a while now, another tank with a high caliber gun and high alpha damage. And I've chosen to add in the Type 85 one because it's a medium tank and the Object 292 plays, in my opinion, more like a support heavy tank with a little bit of armor but nothing that is too effective compared to the other main battle tanks in Era 3. So we're going to start off by looking at the bonuses that this tank has as it's a premium vehicle, then the base stats, then we'll talk about my commander and equipment setup, a little bit about the armor, and then I have three gameplays for you at the end to demonstrate how this thing performs on the battlefield. So if you haven't seen my reviews before, green is the best stat, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, and the ones highlighted in yellow are the updated stats with my commander and equipment setup applied, and we'll talk through that in just a little bit. But to start off with, silver bonus 65% on the Object 292, 10% XP bonus and 10% commander XP bonus, the same as the other two premium tanks in this comparison, the Malo and the Thumper. So that's good news for the Object 292. And now we're going to get stuck into the base stats of this vehicle and compared to the other three vehicles in this comparison. So starting with the hit points, and as a heavy tank it's got 3,850, so a nice healthy slug of hit points, much better than the Type 85, which is the medium tank, and 100 better than the Malo and the Thumper. So good news, and you definitely need to make the most of your hit points because you cannot rely on the armor with the Object 292. Next, view range 500 meters. It's the worst in this comparison. Kind of doesn't matter too much considering that the True Vision system is in play in the Cold War game mode and you're going to be supporting the heavy tanks. Obviously that's kind of map dependent, and we'll look through the gameplay later to see how it plays on various maps, but you are very blind, so definitely take that into consideration. Things will outspot you very easily. You could boost this up, but you want to focus your setup, in my opinion, on the gun because that is the best attribute to this tank. Next, the mobility, and Wargaming was saying that it has great mobility, and they aren't wrong. It has a 1,250 horsepower engine, which isn't quite as high as the Thumper, but is still pretty decent in this comparison, much better than the Type 85. You have a power to weight ratio of 28.78, which means you get up to speed very, very quickly indeed, and you're usually the front runner getting into position, which can be a good thing because it allows you to get quick shots off at the start of the battle against the opposition that are getting into their position. However, it can lead you into trouble, so definitely be aware of that. It's a little bit better than the Malo and Thumper and much better than the Type 85. Next, top forward speed. Unfortunately, you don't have the best. That goes to the Malo at 75 kilometers an hour, but 70 kilometers an hour is more than enough, and of course you can boost that up with your mobility equipment if you choose to do so with your setup. One thing to note about this tank is it has horrendous reverse speed at 20 kilometers an hour. This can get you into trouble if you're on a ridgeline or you need to reverse out of harm's way. It's just better to turn the whole tank around. In doing so, you expose obviously the weakest parts of your armor, but going 20 kilometers an hour in reverse is more like a World War II vehicle than a Cold War vehicle. So yeah, a big downside there to the Object 292, and compared to things like the Thumper and maybe the Abrams and the Challenger, things that can go in reverse very quickly indeed, 38 for the Thumper and higher for the Challenger and Abrams, I believe. Yeah, they can run rings around you kind of in reverse, so take that into consideration. Hold reverse of 44 degrees a second, so much better than the Merlot, and you do have a fully traversable turret on the Object 292, whereas on the Object 477A Merlot you do not, so make the most of that, and you do have a relatively decent hold reverse, and when you get up to your top speed and use that great power to weight, you do feel quite mobile. The only thing to bear in mind is the 36 degrees of turret reverse can catch you out. It's boosted up by your gun handling skills with your setup to get to a reasonable level. However, if things like the Weasel are trying to circle you, it can still feel a little bit sluggish. The best in this comparison goes to the Type 85 at 48 degrees a second and 42 degrees a second respectively on its hull and its turret traverse. Next we're going to go on to the gun, and this does have a big boy gun, 152.4 millimeters, same as the Merlot, which is a 152 millimeter gun. Bear in mind that the Object 292 does not have a secondary gun like the Merlot has an auto cannon. It just has this single fire 152.4 millimeter gun, and it's a gun that is capable of overmatching the sides from the front of the Merlot, so you hit the drive wheels straight on the Merlot and you should be able to penetrate with the Object 292, so it's a good counter for that overpowered tank destroyer. What does it fire out of the gun? APF SDS as standard. It doesn't have a premium ammunition choice, and it has HE as its third ammunition selection. It has best in class shell velocity, the same as the Merlot at 1980 meters a second. You don't have to give too much lead at all, and you have best in class penetration alongside the Merlot again, 900 millimeters of penetration, more than enough to go through everything you will come up against. And for people that like to auto lock, the Merlot and the 292 are great because they just penetrate straight through the front of most things. However, you will get the occasional ricochet, so it is of course better to aim. In terms of the alpha damage, 760 on the APF SDS, the same as the Merlot, 60 more than the Thumper and much more than the Type 85, which has a 105mm gun. In terms of the HE, it's 960 meters a second, which again is the best in class, better than the Type 85, which has HE rounds, and that boosts your alpha damage to 980, but you only carry 40 rounds of ammunition, as we'll see in just a second, so I recommend carrying pretty much just all APF SDS, your standard ammunition. Better shell velocity, better penetration, and consistent damage. Penetration on the HE rounds 180 for that's 980 damage. In terms of the gun handling then and the DPM, you have a 2.6 second aim time, which isn't too bad for such a high caliber gun. 0.1 second better than the Merlot, 0.1 worse than the Thumper, and not quite as good as the Type 85, but that does have a 105mm gun. And bear in mind the Thumper has a 140mm gun, so slightly smaller for that 700 alpha damage that it has. Next, accuracy. 0.31, much better than the 477A Merlot, and you can get it down to a very pinpoint level indeed. It's only a little bit worse than the Thumper, and the best in class of course goes to the medium, which is 0.23 base. Next, DPM 4,431 on the Object 292, much better than the Object 477A Merlot, but bear in mind that that does have a secondary autocannon which will boost that DPM up to a technical level, which is probably much better than the Object 292, of course, if you are able to penetrate every round with that autocannon. You have a better DPM than the Thumper by some way, however the best still goes to the Type 85. Reload is 10.3 seconds for that 760 alpha damage. Compared to the other vehicles in this comparison, it's better than the Merlot and the Thumper, but of course it isn't as good as the medium, which has a 105mm caliber gun. Next, ammo capacity, 40 rounds. It's the worst in this comparison, or the joint worst in this comparison with the Thumper. However, I found that it's more than enough to get through most battles, even with this pretty decent DPM. In terms of gun depression, this is the major drawback for me. 4.5 degrees gun depression, the worst in this comparison by some way, and you're a long way off things like the Thumper, which have 9 degrees. It's very awkward to use on a ridgeline, and you do have to think about your map positioning and where you want to go a little bit more with this vehicle than with other vehicles in Era 3. And lastly, gun elevation 14 degrees, same as the Merlot, very poor indeed, and same as the Type 85, whereas the Thumper has 20 degrees. So if you're shooting up a slope, it can become very frustrating if people are above you and you can get your gun up. So that's also something to think about with this vehicle. But the take home basically is nice silver bonus, you have an XP and commander bonus, nice amount of hit points, poor view range, great mobility, although the turret traverse isn't too great. You have the best in class shell velocity, penetration and alpha damage in this comparison. Pretty decent gun handling for this 152.4mm gun, and a decent DPM considering the gun caliber. And of course, with a higher caliber gun, you will be dealing more module damage, setting more fires, and hopefully more ammo racks. So that's it for the base stats of the Object 292. We're now going to talk about my commander and equipment setup, what that does to the Object 292 stats, and then we'll go into the garage and have a look at the armor viewer of this vehicle. So in terms of equipment, what do I run on the Object 292? I like to run the improved ventilation, advanced loader and gun stabilizer. Originally, I decided to run the traction system to boost up the mobility a little bit more and improve the whole traverse. However, I found that I really needed the ventilation loader and the stabilizer to get the most out of this gun, because it can be a little bit inaccurate when you have sort of stopped moving, and when you are moving, the bloom goes out quite a long way, so definitely pay attention to that. And in terms of my commander skills, Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Clutch Braking and Track Mechanics. So Sixth Sense and Born Leader is standard on every one of my commanders, Rapid Loading to help the DPM, and 4 gun handling skills to get the most out of this high caliber gun. Clutch Braking to improve the whole traverse and get your armor, or what little armor you have for a heavy tank, round to face your opponents, and also to run away when you're trying to get out of harm's way. You don't want to be reversing with that poor reverse speed. And Track Mechanic to keep your tracks on. Don't sit out in front of opponents because your armor is pretty ineffective. So what does that do to the Object 292 stats? Well, I've now got a view range of 532 meters, so it's boosted up just a little bit. Whole traverse has gone from 44 to 47.8 degrees a second, and turret traverse has improved from 36 to 42.7 degrees a second, and I found that the mobility is more than enough with this setup, especially for how I like to play this vehicle. In terms of gun handling and DPM, I've gone from 2.6 down to 2.44 second aim time, from a 0.31 down to 0.26 accuracy, so very accurate indeed. In terms of the DPM, it's gone from 4,431 to 5,920, and that means that I now reload, instead of 10.3 seconds base, it's now 7.71 seconds for 760 alpha damage, so that's a very nice increase in the DPM there. So that's it for talking about the Object 292 and comparing to the other vehicles. We're now going to head on into the garage. I'll talk you through the armor of this vehicle, and then we will get stuck into the first of 3 gameplays. So I'll see you over in the garage in just a little bit. So we are now in the garage having a look at the armor viewer of the Object 292, and like I said at the start of today's video, it's more of a support heavy tank or a heavy medium than a true heavy because of the armor, and we're going to go through from the thickest down to the thinnest parts of the armor and discuss why that is. So the thickest part of the armor, 580mm, which is this part here around the mantlet, and this isn't covered by any spaced or composite armor, and there's lots of tanks in Era 3 that have penetration to go straight through this, so if you're an Object 292 yourself, or maybe in a Merlot, you can just butcher the front of this mantlet and it's only going to get worse from here on in. 510mm section to the right and below that previous section. The sides of the turret, 360mm of armor. They're slightly rounded, however, if you're shooting it even from a slight angle, it's a flatter section and people are just going to go straight through this. It's covered by a little bit of composite armor to protect against ATGM and HE, but that's pretty much it. When you're hull down with the poor 4.5 degrees of gun depression, people could just go straight through the front of your turret. And there's a cupola, as you can see to the top left. We'll have a look in a minute, and that's a very big weak point as well. Next section, 320mm, which is behind the gun. There's a 290mm band here, and the first part of this viewport here and around to the side 280mm, very easily penetrable here by most tanks in Era 3. Then you have these two sections here, 280mm from the rear, and if this thing is giving you its side, nice and easy turret to penetrate there. In terms of the cupola itself and the turret ring, 150mm, and this is always visible because it's only got 4.5 degrees, so even if this thing's hull down, you can just shoot this, and this is what you want to go for. If this thing's face hugging you and you've got ATGMs, then you could just shoot into the turret ring or just shoot the cupola, and you'll be able to penetrate and do some very, very nasty damage to this vehicle. You have 140mm of upper plate armour, and it is angled, so you do get the occasional ricochet, and there's another section, I believe, on top of this. We'll have a look in just a second, which is composite or spaced armour. However, pretty poor for an Era 3 heavy tank, and there's that big square section underneath the gun, which is a weaker point. If you want to try and penetrate an ATGM, that's the place that you can do it on the upper hull, and as you can see, the lower plate is covered in like a spaced armour section which drops down from the weld between the upper plate and the lower plate. Next, the lower plate itself, 105mm, so it's protected by a little bit of that spaced armour, but yeah, people are just going to absolutely butcher through the front of this, and if they're not shooting your upper plate, they can go through your lower plate very easily indeed. A bit of angling which might protect against auto cannons, but yeah, not much at all. Actual sections here, as you can see, of the sides of the turret, 95mm, but it doesn't protect much from that extra section which is on top of this, and yeah, from the sides, a nice flat target for you to be able to shoot. The actual top here of the turret, 90mm of armour, so if you get above this tank, yeah, very easy to penetrate that section. The front sort of 3/4 of the Object 292, 80mm of side armour, pretty effective at side scraping towards the front part. However, the rear part is weaker, and you're not going to be able to side scrape against a certain caliber gun, which I'll tell you in just a second. Gun, 70mm, and there's that composite armour to the sides of the turret and a little bit on top protecting against ATGM. So if you've got ATGMs, don't shoot this bit of the turret and you should be golden. Just shoot the cupola, try and land it on top of the turret, and yeah, you're going to be dealing some very nasty damage indeed. The rear sort of third of the side is 60mm, which means if this thing's side scraping, if you shoot towards the rear with a 121mm caliber gun or higher, you're going to overmatch this section here, so it can't even side scrape against most tanks in Era 3. Very, very annoying indeed. You have these sections here, 50mm of rear armour, and then another 50mm of spaced or composite armour over the front of this hull, but it doesn't protect against much, just against HE and some ATGMs, but even sometimes ATGMs have gone straight through me here, or they've probably just dipped underneath the turret and penetrated the top of the upper plate. So yeah, pretty ineffective there. The rear of the armour, 40mm of armour there on the side of this turret. However, if you're going to be shooting it from the side, you can just shoot towards the front of the turret and go through that cupola, or just the side of the tank in general. You're going to be easily able to go through. Next, side skirt armour, 25mm, and that spaced armour over the lower plate. Only protects against HE splash and ATGM splash, but yeah, pretty ineffective. And then you've got underbelly armour and the track armour, 20mm, a little bit of 15mm above the sides, but yeah, that's not going to protect you against ATGMs or even really a lot of HE damage. It's a pretty poor tank in terms of the armour. You get occasional ricochets when it's at an extreme angle off the upper plate, or the turret when you catch it at a weird angle, but you've got that massive cupola, a horrible lower plate, pretty ineffective spaced armour, and you can only side scrape against lower caliber guns because they can just overmatch the rear of your vehicle. So yeah, pretty poor. Get round to the rear of it, just penetrate it in the rear with HE or ATGMs. So you still want to try and side scrape where possible with the Object 292 to minimise the sort of target that your opponents shoot at, and when you know they're aiming directly at the front of you, just wiggle a little bit, aim at sort of 40-45 degrees, try and wiggle backwards and forwards and hope they catch an auto ricochet angle. If people are shooting you with ATGMs, the best chance is your upper plate, lower plate, and the sort of side skirt there of trying to catch the shells or the fronts of the turret. But yeah, people are just going to go through the front of you with the penetration that's around in Era 3. Yeah, it's more like a medium armoured medium tank rather than a heavy tank, but yeah, is all about the gun, make the gun work, and you can still have fun in this vehicle. So that's it for the armour of the Object 292. We're now going to head into the first of 3 gameplays, so I'll see you over there in just a second. So then we are now into the first gameplay of today's video, and we're here on Chalbang in an encounter battle, and you can see that we are the one to get going first with this great acceleration speed. It really doesn't need any extra help in terms of the mobility equipment, in my opinion. I tried the traction system out like I mentioned earlier in the video, but I felt it beneficial to improve the gun as much as possible, as that is the best attribute of this vehicle. So we've raced into position before anyone else, and now we're going to have to stop on this hill because we don't want to get into a tricky situation where we are outnumbered right off the bat and people just YOLO you and rush you. That's happened many times in this vehicle in platoons. They just come straight for you, and this tank is not very good at fighting more than one person off, especially if they can aim. So we've stopped here on this hill, gone high enough so we can use the poor 4.5 degrees of gun depression, and we have now put 2 into that M3A2 Bradley, and you can see that it reloads really quickly for this high caliber gun. Got a very nice pinpoint accurate gun. Gun handling feels nice when you're in position. However, if you are moving or you've just stopped, it can feel a little bit derpy still, so definitely pay attention to that. Very nasty 477A Malo there in front of us. We can go straight through his drive wheels, however he is angling and making it difficult for us, so we decide to take the easy shot and shoot the MBT-70 there, and we're up to 2.2k damage in the first couple of minutes, and now we can try and make this horrible gun depression work against this BMP3. He comes into sight and we manage to get one into him. Someone's just sat right behind me for some reason. Looks like they've either gone to get a sandwich or maybe they've gone to the toilet, but get another one into the BMP3. We're going to pop up at this distance. It's kind of safe to auto-aim, although it is always best to aim, because I've missed quite a few shells today by lazily auto-aiming. You can tell that I've definitely had a month off, but in this small engagement, the DPM and the gun handling have done very well for us, and we're up to 4.5k damage. I'm always trying to pay attention to when the enemy are firing, but especially so in the Object 292, because I want to pop out and get a shot without taking any return fire, whereas if I was in the Object 477A Malo, I could just sit in front of people and there's not really much they can do, especially if they don't know where to aim. I was a bit annoyed that the M1A2 kept going round here, and I gave him a little bit of a nudge, which I probably shouldn't have done. But yeah, I was having a lot of that today. People just parking in front of me, parking behind me, stopping me from reversing, getting in the way of my shots, and I must have been getting to the end of my tether. But we're going to move on with our mobility, and this thing has the best mobility to get forwards and put some hurt out on the opposition. So we're going to race into position. We fire on the move, but you can see it's quite derpy, and now we're going to follow this little river down the middle and get to where the action is. Stop, let it aim in for just a second. Great gun handling going to work, and a nice big alpha damage chunk into the rear of that Leopard 2A5, and it really feels like you're chunking the opponents down really quickly, quicker than with the Thumper or with the Malo itself. However, you do not have that auto cannon as your secondary gun. You just have this single fire gun, so it's a little bit easier sort of to manage in that regard. However, the gun depression is horrific, and when you get shot, you take damage like we just did there against that enemy heavy tank. And now this Type 89 is to our right. Again, I auto-aim. I should get into the habit of aiming again, because that's not what you want to do. However, from a sort of mid-distance, with the extremely good shell velocity, just under 2,000 meters a second, we are able to hit most tanks, especially if they are pretty stationary like that Type 89. We're up to 8.6k direct damage, 697 assistance. We have blocked a little bit, showing you that you get the occasional ricochet, but you definitely don't want to rely on the armour. What you want to do with this vehicle is just think about your positioning on the battlefield. Try and flank your opponents, get to the sides and rear. You have the penetration to penetrate them from wherever you are, but you want to try and create those crossfire opportunities so that you are not in direct line of the main sort of push with the heavy tanks, and you're not going to be focused out, because as you can see here, when you get going into a brawl, you just get absolutely wrecked because you have absolutely no armor for a heavy tank. Again, lazily auto aiming. I didn't realize that the horrific gun depression didn't allow me a shot on that tank, but we still finished above 10k in that game with a first class. And we finished with a profit with or without a premium account with a times 1.25 silver booster, 1 kill, 10.4k direct damage, 924 assistance, and we did block a little bit, 640, but yeah, not as much as you'd hope for a heavy tank, but a still pretty decent result with this fantastic gun. So that's it for the first gameplay. We're now going to head on into the second one, so I'll see you over there in just a tick. So then we're now into the second gameplay of today's video, and we are here on Swamp in a standard battle, and we're going to make our way very quickly again into position using the great mobility of the Object 292, and then we're just going to have to wait while our teammates catch up. It could be fantastic to have this mobility to catch people out early on, but yeah, don't let it get you into trouble. This is definitely not a brawling heavy tank. You have the DPM to fight off some of the other tanks, but more than one tank at once, this thing can struggle. So we're going to handbrake turn here, see if we can get any cross shots down the 1-2 line at people making their way into position, and the enemies are going to make a bit of a push towards our base at the start of this battle, and we're going to put a lot of hurt on this AMX-32. As he pops the smoke, we managed to get a shot right through the side, set him on fire. High caliber guns deal more module damage, ammo racks, fires, that kind of thing. We get a second one, and yeah, he's now down just above 70 hit points, and we're up to 2.1k damage in the first minute and a little bit of this battle. So have to be careful on these ridge lines. 4.5 degrees means I'm going to have to expose more than you want to in this vehicle. You want to try and find the smallest kind of ridges to dip over and put your gun to work. Don't want to skyline yourself on ridge lines too often because you're a relatively large target. Small for a heavy tank, but easy enough to see with the True Vision system, and you don't have good concealment, so you are going to get spotted very frequently. And as you can see there, we had a shot there on the I think it was the 477 aim low, but the gun depression meant we had to lurch forward. It ruins your aim a little bit, and yeah, annoyingly we don't get a shot on him. But another 477 aim low comes out. We try and go through the drive wheel there, but I needed to shoot a little bit more to the right, a little bit more centrally, and hopefully we could have gone through. But that's what's annoying about that vehicle. It can just sit on hills, whereas this vehicle, you have to think much more about your positioning, where to shoot your opponents, because you can't just sit out there and wait for them to come to you. So the enemies now are starting to make their way towards the base, and we're going to try and put as many shots here as they make their way towards our base as possible. Pretty nice DPM like we've discussed already in this vehicle. That shell velocity really does slap hard. Your shells fly so fast. It means that if you are a little bit off with your lead, you can still have a great chance of shooting targets that are on the move. And because we have got some tracking damage in this game already, we're up to 4.4k direct damage and 2.4k assistance, and there's the Xbox telling me to have a break after an hour. Obviously the Xbox is a little bit of a lightweight, but we're going to try and get to the sides of these tanks because we don't have any shots. One great thing about having such good penetration is the fact that you can go through a lot of the turrets of tanks that other tanks can only dream of in Era 3, and that makes it very easily for you, if people poke up on ridgelines to shoot you, to go straight through that their turret, and it manages to sort of dissuade them from coming after you. The Wiesel TOW manages to miss me, which means that we are able to turn around, free aim our shot, and with the great shell velocity we managed to put a nice chunk of damage into him, and we're also getting some spotting damage for spotting him up. There is the enemy Challenger 1 there, and I'm going to very lazily in a minute auto-aim on the front and just bounce where if I aimed I would be able to penetrate. I've really got to stop doing this. It's a habit that I've picked up after not playing for a month, so you can see when you do get to the sides you can deal some very nasty damage indeed, and if you just stick slightly behind the push, you are able to support your heavy tanks and deal some very nasty damage. You just don't want to make yourself the only one that the enemies have to shoot. You want to be the one that is supporting the push rather than completely leading it, especially if there are more than one tank that you are pushing because you don't have the armor to cope with. However, if you want to do a bit of sniping, play that kind of support tank role, a little bit like a medium tank would, then this tank does very, very well indeed. So we're now going to turn around and push up because the reverse speed is so poor. Going to wait for a shot either into the drive wheel or the side of the Malo there. We get one into the side, track him in place, get a bit of tracking, and yeah, that's all she wrote for the second game there with 2 kills. Pick up a nice lot of direct damage, 9.1k direct damage, 3.3k assistance, and again a profit without a premium account. Only a first class because people are going to be playing this very well, especially the good players, because they have great knowledge of map positions and where to take tanks that have poor gun depression and how to utilise the pretty poor armour that this vehicle has. And yeah, that's a pretty nice combined damage game there, 12.4k combined damage here on Swamp in the second game. And we're now going to head on to the best game that I had in my short play session earlier, into the third and final game, so I'll see you there in just a second. So we are now into the third and final game of today's video, and we are here on Ruinberg, which is the newly reintroduced and revamped map, which has been missing for quite some time, so it's nice to see it back into rotation. We're here on a standard battle on this map, and we're going to head to the 0 line, to the little city area. And we're not going to head into the main brawling location that all of the other heavy tanks have gone down the 1, 2 and 3 line, and my reasoning being I want to be able to use this sort of mid-ridge because it's not very big and 4.5 degrees of gun depression is pretty good, but also we have nice side shots into tanks that are crossing in the centre of the brawling location down in F1, F2, and that means that we're not going to be target number 1, and yeah, we want to put our gun to work without taking as much fire as we would have if we had went down with the other heavy tanks. Unfortunately, we only track that tank there and we take some damage from the side, and now we're going to have to reverse out of harm's way. I decide to pop the enhanced smokescreen which I carry because the reverse speed is so poor with this vehicle, and now I'm going to take the opportunity while I'm unspotted to get a shot or two into some of those tanks that are trying to shoot me from down there in F1. Unfortunately there I don't give enough lead and we missed the Leclerc, but we are going to move down a little bit so that they can't get shots on us, and hopefully we're going to be able just to poke around this corner as and when and just get shots here and there. I don't want to sit out in front of anyone. I'm trying to get re-stealthed in between most of my shots, not all of them. And yeah, in between every shot, I'm reversing out of harm's way. I'm trying to side scrape, not because the armor's great, but because I want to minimize the amount that the enemy have to fire at my tank. And yeah, just chunk the opponents down slowly, play that support role, and when there are less tanks on the battlefield towards the latter stages of the battle, we will be able to use our nice healthy slug of hit points and then try and get people to bounce off our mediocre armor, to say the least. But we've come up behind another enemy object 292 and another heavy tank to the left, and we're just going to put round and round into the side and rear of these vehicles until they do something about it or we take them out. We are hold down, so we have the best chance of bouncing people off our upper plate or our turret, and you can see there that a shot there went, I believe, off the side of our turret. Doesn't happen too often, but it can happen when you are hold down or when you're wiggling and angling at 40 degrees, so it's always best to do it regardless, just in case you get a miracle bounce. And now we can move over as we know that we have lost the city, and we can push over this ridgeline, clear up this area of tanks with our teammates, then we can regroup and go and defend our base. And in that time that I've been talking, 6.5k direct damage, 569 assistance, and we have blocked over 1,000 damage, which doesn't happen all the time, but yeah, it's enough sometimes to keep you in the game with your nice healthy amount of hit points, but please do not rely on it because you'll be very disappointed indeed. And now we are going to tag team with this 2A5, the Leopard 2A5, put round after round into the enemies that are coming after us, and in a minute when I lose some hit points I'm probably going to have to side scrape off of this Leopard. He has much better frontal armour than this vehicle has, and I'm going to be more used to him in the game than not. I'm trying to side scrape far enough so that people that are trying to shoot me don't shoot him. He's in a sort of half hold down location off of the side of this building, and again I very lazily auto aim to the front of the chieftain. Probably should have gone through, we got a bit unlucky with that bounce, but yeah, always worth aiming your shots even though you have fantastic penetration with this tank. And yeah, it's all about trying to make the most of this gun, trying to utilise this DPM to the fullest whilst also restricting the enemy's chances of shooting you. You can't play it like a hold down heavy on a ridge where you can sit there and bounce shells, or like a brawler like the T72 BM or the 477A Malo. You have to think more about your armour, because as you can see, when people start to get to the sides and rear, it really falls apart. We have managed to pick up 12.5k damage in the time that we were in this battle, so yeah, just shy of 5 minutes, and now it's a 2 versus 2 for the remainder of this battle. We have a Challenger 1 on our team who is over 1,000 hit points, and a Leopard 2A5 who takes out the Type 88A, and we can sit here and just finish watching this game as they go and try and take out the last remaining heavy tank on the enemy team. This Challenger 1 gets shot through the window, which is a very sneaky shot, and now he's going to go and help our friendly Leopard 2A5 take out this M1A2. It's still a very sort of 50-50 whether we'd lose this, depending on the caliber of the M1A2 player. And yeah, we're just going to sit and watch while I give you my final thoughts on this tank. So what do I think of the Object 292? Well, the gun is great. It's lovely to have that penetration. You have enough hit points and enough armor to make it just about usable in Era 3 to not be annoying. It's not overpowered like the 477A Malo is, which is kind of good news for the meta, but a bit disappointing if you're looking for something really powerful. But yeah, if you think about your map positioning, you think about where you want to go, try and flank your opponents, get into crossfire opportunities and limit the amount the enemy can shoot at you. You can still do good things with this gun. Just bear in mind horrendous reverse speed and a pretty damn bad armor on this vehicle, and gun depression really holds you back. So a nice profit there without a premium account. That's with a 0.25 silver booster, I believe. No kills in this battle, but we pick up 12,500 damage, 569 assistance, and we block 1,600. Because we're wiggling, because we're trying to get people to bounce off, the only chance we have is angling our armor and side scraping as much as possible, going hold down and just hoping for the best. But yeah, put your gun to work and it can still do good things for you, but don't think it's going to be one of those powerhouses that's just going to absolutely steamroll the opposition. You've got to think a little bit more with this heavy tank that plays more like a heavy medium. So let me know what you think of the review and this tank in the comments down below. Thank you all for your patience whilst I have been away. It's really nice to be back, especially in time for this brand new season of the Flames of War season. And until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.